have a whole lot of role to play, essentially knowing the countries in Africa. What is your own take on Nigeria's place in this program?
Nigeria has the first place, because Nigeria is the superpower of Africa, with 75% of the economy of ECOWAS, 25% of the GDP of the whole continent. So Nigeria is a very, very important partner for France dealing with economics in Africa. And we want to have more ties, more links with Nigeria in both French companies in Nigeria, Nigerian companies in France, and we want to improve our relationship, which are in all fields, from security to economy.
We want to ensure that Africa, it's such an attractive place. Nigeria is so attractive through the high demographics, the development of the population, economic powerhouse as well. There are many young people in Africa. There's a very strongly developing middle class as well. And you can't be in Africa without being in Nigeria. Nigeria is in the heart of Africa.
The group of Africans and the group of the private sector. Because I think it's by putting our thoughts and our heads together on this issue that we're going to be able to make some headway. Why are we talking about innovative financing? We're talking about it because obviously the needs for development finance for the continent far surpass the amount that we're able to mobilize in terms of our fiscal situation in our countries. I think that Michelle mentioned a number of these. But if you look at some of the needs that we have, then we have to think big about how we are going to meet these. According to the UNDP, we need about 30 billion per annum to eradicate hunger globally. 25 billion and 36 billion are required annually for HIV/AIDS and education. Another 10 billion is required to control malaria and tuberculosis. And for infrastructure, we've all heard the figures of anywhere from 93 to 112 billion annually to close the investment gap. I'm just taking certain sectors. But when you add up all these needs, you know that we have to come up with means to respond to this, and that's why innovative financing is important. I've not even mentioned the issue of how we tackle climate change, which Michelle referred to, and which is very important for us. So what we need to do is think first and foremost of how we can manage sustainable development and shared and inclusive growth through finding the right instruments. And I'm going to say something that, I put it under this heading of innovative financing, even though it's not innovation. Because I think we need to think about this. This is the first and foremost things. How to raise far better and more efficiently our own domestic resources. At the end of the day, sustainable development and meeting our own needs will have to come from our resources. We have said public resources will not be enough, but we have to make more effort than we're making presently. And I think that if we look at the share of tax to GDP of many of our countries, we find that we are falling a little bit behind. At least I can say that for Nigeria, tax to GDP ratio at 12% is far less than even the 15% that the IMF recommends as a minimum threshold for countries. So many of us can make additional effort. And I'm just pointing that innovation or not, the first effort is to look up within ourselves and see, can we raise additional resources ourselves to meet our own needs? And in this regard, I would also say that for donors, this is an area where very little is invested. Only 1% of aid is invested in actually supporting improved tax administration and improvement of our tax policies. So this is a very important thing that, for every $1 raised, every $1 invested, you can raise an additional $30 in terms of taxes. That's a study that the OECD has done. So why don't we, in terms of support, put more effort into this traditional area? I put it under innovative financing because we don't think about it enough. And that is the first innovation I have. Can we do more with traditional sources? Because I think this is a very important area to think about. So that's the first point I want to make. Then coming away from that, we've talked about a number of instruments that we can look at. In infrastructure, we've said that the gap is anywhere from 93 to 120 billion, and we've talked about public-private partnerships. But the reason that this has not taken off as much as we would like is because it takes an average of 7 years. That's the study shows it takes us an average of 7 years to complete a PPP transaction. That is longer than the life cycle of any administration. And the president's alluded to.
But for short-term project, is it sustainable in the long term, or is it in the hands of different fields? And I'd like to thank PricewaterhouseCoopers Meridian and other. You have experienced your adjustments programs, and what is behind this strategy, and what do you expect from this new Africa?
Everyone, ladies and gentlemen.
2 billion in 6 years. We realized that game needs to change. We also decided, let's look at, first find out what are the issues and how we are going to address those issues, how we are going to create something totally new and based on our experience through those 49 projects. Our diagnostic was as follows. Number one, lack of well-prepared projects. Project development is costly and very long time. That increases the cost even further. So the first thing, preparation, 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 another PPP. The second thing is public resources. If a project needs actually to go to the financial close, and if the project development cost is 10% of the project, and a government needs to do 3 priority projects, each one $500 million, they need to put $150 million into project development. And there is no resources as such. The next one is lack of early risk takers. Because of all these issues we are discussing, actually private sector is not confident where they are going to take their money back. So therefore, they are not coming to this area. They are not willing to fund the venture capital for infrastructure. The next one is lack of smart capital. What we do is, all the development finance institutions, we provide grant to governments to prepare projects. They are gone. They are not reimbursable. They don't come back to us. And on top of that, if you look at today, whole Africa, what is available for project preparation as a grant? $80 million per year. What is needed? $2.5 billion per year if we would like to do only priority infrastructure projects in the continent. So therefore, we decided to create a new vehicle called Africa 50, which is already incorporated, which is about to be operational. It's not another DFI. It has new DNA, it's flexible, it's efficient, it's legally and financially independent, not a donor-funded institution. It is a PPP, and it provides returns to its investors. So, how Africa 50 will be working? The first thing is actually, we will have 2 different companies under the platform. The first one being a project development company, taking full commercial approach for project development and continuously recycle the capital, develops the project or co-develops the projects. Once the project reaches the financial close, takes the capital and some premium goes to the next project, and continuously provide a pipeline of opportunities for everyone in this room. That in the next few months, we will be reaching to 40 of them. All total, project development capital will be $500 million. Through joint development agreements and co-developing with the governments and private sector, we will scale up this capital to $1.15 billion.
In other words, we finance our projects with foreign currencies, and so there's an exchange rate factor. And in the short term, we finance on the short term things whose return is computed on the long term. And so then you have a maturity mismatch, a currency mismatch, and the perception of political risk. All this combines to increase the risk premium Now, what can we do about this? And this is why I would like to respond to what Mrs. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala said. The first thing is to try and see how can we mobilize institutional investors. No continent in the world was ever able to build its infrastructure just looking at private savings or public financing without going through institutional investors. And our institutional investors, precisely because of the perceived risk, would rather buy US Treasury bills at a very, very low return rather than investing it in a kind of project such as was defined by my colleague TAS and Varipur. But this is all to do with risk perceptions, and how can this change? Well, we cannot really change perceptions, but we can offer more and more guarantees to write against risk, because of course a lot of our transactions will involve financial or direct project financing using some form of intermediation through various instruments. But of course, for such intermediation to take place, you need to have the necessary guarantees. So that's a form of innovative financing, and this is where financial institutions can play a different role. Now that's the one thing. But the other thing is what we have is local currency financing, and Mr. Fall will discuss this, because we have securities exchanges in our country where we can develop local currency financing. But the idea is to then propose long-term returns, and then we can mobilize private savings, and so that would avoid the mismatch between short-term use and long-term resources. So the idea is how to make better use of local currencies, and I like the concept of shared responsibility.